Right, Joao Felix is back. The 24-year-old Portugueseman signs for Chelsea from Atletico Madrid on a 6-year contract in a deal that's worth around £42 million. And I've got to be honest, straight off the back, the reaction to this signing is one that somewhat confuses me. So in this video, I want to speak about the signing of Felix, and I also want to use this as an opportunity to address some of the negativity that is flying around the media around Chelsea at this moment in time. But people, before we get into all that, welcome back to the Joey Knight podcast. If you are new around here and you like the content, at the end of the video, please hit the subscribe button right now, smash the like button, and I also want to hear your thoughts in the comment section on the signing of Joao Felix. Let's get into it. So after impressing me massively during his loan spell at Stamford Bridge a couple of seasons ago, I was quite hopeful that we would sign Joao Felix on a permanent transfer. However, Mauricio Pochettino then came in, and I feel like he felt that Joao Felix would probably be a signing that we did not need to make. He was obviously looking at the likes of Nkunku, maybe one or two other players, and feeling like we had enough depth in that position. And also, the fee that Atletico Madrid wanted for Joao Felix at the time was nowhere near the 40-odd million that we have now paid for Joao Felix. So despite me wanting him at the time, I can hardly say I threw my toys out the pram when we didn't land Joao Felix on a permanent transfer. And now we have, I can somewhat understand the skepticism around the deal. You know, Chelsea have too many players. Where's he going to fit in? You've just signed Pedro Neto, who you played on the left wing against Manchester City, and Joao Felix plays on the left wing. So did you really need to go and sign him? Blah, 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 blah. Listen, we will get on to Joao Felix himself. But firstly, do you know what I'm really finding funny here? 99.9% of the negativity that is coming around this deal and coming around Chelsea's incoming transfer business at this moment in time is not from Chelsea fans. It's not from people that even support Chelsea Football Club and therefore should have an invested interest in Chelsea Football Club. And for the one or two that claim to be Chelsea fans that are putting out negative stories around this, I'm not sure whether I regard them as Chelsea fans either way. Clearly, negative stories about this football club get you clicks. And a lot of these lot need the clicks, don't they? But for me, if you take a step away and look at the bigger picture, and bearing in mind the size of our squad, which we will come on to speak about, you might need to take a couple of strides away to view that bigger picture. 24-year-old Joao Felix in the year 2024 is a better player than Raheem Sterling. Does that mean that Raheem Sterling is a bad player? No, it doesn't mean that. Both good players. One, in my opinion, in Joao Felix, better than the other. Now, when the news broke that Raheem Sterling was looking to be moved on by Chelsea Football Club, there was somewhat of a mixed reception, but I think for the most part, most Chelsea fans could understand why, you know. If you look at Raheem Sterling, he's a player that is turning 30 this season, and he's the highest paid player on our books at £325,000 per week. So if you have a player being paid that sort of money, who at the moment isn't a nailed down first team starter, still on a fairly long contract, and is coming towards an age where you can't really see his career going on an upward trajectory from this point onwards, I think that most logical Chelsea fans could understand why it would be a good idea to move him on. As they could with another man, Romelu Lukaku, who's being paid $325,000 per week. As they could with another man, Ben Chilwell, who's being paid $250,000 per week. As they could with another player, Kepa Arrizabalaga, who is being paid $150,000 per week. But we know that life and football is not just as simple as a click of the fingers and these players are gone. So at the moment, we are in the process of juggling plates, aren't we? And of course, if we don't manage to move these players on by the end of the window, some of this business could come back to bite us in the arse. But we do need to look into the past, and we do need to acknowledge the fact that we have managed, come the end of the transfer window in previous windows, to be able to move on players that the media said there was no way that we were going to be able to get rid of, and they were going to sit on their contracts and we wouldn't be able to find suitors for these players. You know, Koulibaly, Aubameyang, Malang Sarr all come to mind. You know, Ziyech, Mendy, Pulisic, these are all players that the media assumed we wouldn't be able to get moves for. And then we did. And it doesn't really get spoken about, does it? Because it wouldn't suit the agenda to speak about any of the better business that Chelsea have done. And you may say, well, it's not better business because we signed him in the first place. And I do understand that. But two things can happen simultaneously. You can do a bit of bad business and then you can also do a bit of good business. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is you can only really judge the business that has been done come the end of the transfer window, you know. And this whole narrative that is being run with at the second everywhere online that Chelsea have 42 players, mate, honestly, what a load of bollocks. When are people going to start to accept that in modern day football, sometimes you pay transfer fees for players that are going to come in to your youth system? When you list out those 42 players, right, you got the likes of David Washington on there, okay? He might have come off the bench once or twice, but he never made a first team start for Chelsea last season. I'll tell you who he made lots of starts for. The Chelsea under-23 team, as did Tyrick George, who was listed in there. Good player, I liked him in pre-season, but he's never made a start for Chelsea Football Club in a competitive game. He is a youth team player, an under-23 squad member. The same as Tino Angerin, Eddie Beach, Achampong, Bashir Humphreys, the same for all these boys. They're youth team players. Why does no other club have a spotlight cast on players that aren't first team squad members? Why? Because it doesn't suit the narrative. And then there are players like Romelu Lukaku, who we're led to believe has agreed a deal with Napoli now, who are imminent departures and are not training at Cobham with Enzo Maresca. Enzo Maresca, ladies and gentlemen, is not at Cobham working with 42 players. So at the end of the window, let's look at how many we've got in there, let's look at who we've got in there, and then we can make a judgment on who we deem as actually being in the Chelsea squad. And I do understand that the way that Chelsea now do business has forced me and you to recondition ourselves, you know. Bringing in a signing used to be something that we would get excited about. And now we have to understand that some of these signings may make the headlines, but they might not make the first team. And that is why we have to understand that whether or not you rate the way that Chelsea Football Club are doing business, this may end up being a model that some teams choose to follow. You hear the likes of Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher last night saying, well, if this is the way forward, then why aren't other big teams doing it? And you know what? You might be right, but maybe we're the trailblazers. Who knows? We won't know until things play out. But until they play out and until they really negatively hit us, why are we making a judgment on it so soon? Because ultimately, we're going to get our answers later on down the line. But as for now, I like to look at things from a more optimistic point of view, a more optimistic perspective. And if you told me that in this transfer window, Chelsea could hypothetically move on Lukaku, Sterling, Chilwell and Kepa and free up over £1 million worth of wages off of our weekly wage bill, nowhere near the first team many of these players are at the moment, by the way, and we could bring in the likes of Joao Felix, Pedro Neto and very possibly a Victor Osimhen, I honestly don't know any Chelsea fan that could look at that and not say that that is good business. And yes, it's somewhat hypothetical and things do need to align and fall in place for this to happen, but I do genuinely believe that this is the plan that is being worked towards. And if it happens, I feel like we're going to have had a great window. Do I want the likes of Conor Gallagher, who has now left the club? It hasn't had the here we go, I don't think, or has it? But it's going to have happened. Do I want the players like Conor Gallagher and Trevoh Chalobah to go? No, I don't. But there is middle ground. And that's what I think we as the fan base and the media need to accept. There's so many YouTubers and people in the media that are failing to see this. And that is that the club can make both good and bad decisions simultaneously. But now let's move on to Joao Felix. Joao Felix is one of those players that I personally just love to watch. So pleasing on the eye, and he's very, very versatile. You know, he can play on either wing, he can play as a centre attacking midfielder, second striker, or he can play up top. And let's say, for an example, if we don't manage to go and get a Victor Osimhen over the line, and we're heading into this season as Nicholas Jackson as the recognised number 9, I think that Joao Felix can offer him some very healthy competition for that spot, and may even be a more clinical player to have up front in that position. Not every single team has that typical number 9, you know. We saw the brilliance of Erling Haaland on the weekend. He gets one opportunity to score and he takes that opportunity. But we also see teams like Arsenal, who are really pushing City at the moment, who don't have that out-and-out number 9, you know. So if you look at the job that maybe a Kai Havertz does for them, who's to say that a Joao Felix couldn't do that sort of job for us? And maybe the signing of Joao Felix does spell the end for the likes of Sterling, and it does push Mikhailo Mudryk to the side. But can I ask you a question? Are you that bothered? Because as much as I do rate him, when we were bringing in maybe Dewsbury Hall and only Dewsbury Hall, or Amari Kellerman, who we know wasn't really going to play and stuff like that, our main concern was that we weren't actually levelling up in the transfer market. We weren't bringing in better players than we were letting go. But in the likes of Joao Felix and the likes of Pedro Neto, I honestly do think we are levelling up with players that are ready for the here and now, with players that have either Premier League or major European League experience, and players that we are going to improve with, rather than players who do have these really, really high ceilings, but most of us have never even heard of, you know. We could play about 70 games this season, and therefore the need for rotation will very much be there. And that's not even to go into the fact that we are a club that have had our injury problems. So listen, I will never be surprised at the media putting a negative spin on Chelsea's transfer business, because that is just what the media do. But if you're an actual Chelsea fan, can you honestly sit here and tell me you feel negative about the signing of Joao Felix? The boy is gravy, mate. He's really, really good, and he does level us up. Maybe you lot might feel something different, and I'm very interested to read the comment section and for you to tell me whether or not you do. But for one last time, let me just run through the plan for right now as I see it. We're going to be getting a fair few players out the door, some of which we're not that bothered about, some of which we'll be happy to see the back of, and some of which it may pull on our heartstrings a little bit and we will be reluctant to see go. Gallagher, who's already gone. Trevoh Chalobah, who we feel is going to go, and obviously we would like to stay, or I personally would very much like to stay. Chile, I'm not that bothered about it, I've got to be honest. Lukaku, Kepa, Sterling, Brower, again, not that bothered. But if we get rid of them as a direct result of moving those players on, we could have brung in, by the end of the window, Kiernan Dewsbury Hall, Pedro Neto, Joao Felix, and hopefully Victor Osimhen. Come on, people. Don't tell me that that is not good transfer business. Don't tell me that those moves, some of which are still hypothetical, do not result in Chelsea being a better team and a more competitive team this season than we were last season. And I use the word hypothetical because obviously all of these moves need to happen, but who's to say it doesn't? Let's be positive, man. Let's have a glass full mentality and try and go into this season with a feeling of optimism. Because if we have that as a fan base, I do think that there is an element of that that will translate onto the pitch. So before I cap it off, I want to make this very, very clear here. This is not a video of me saying, what Clearlake are doing are brilliant. I think Clearlake make plenty of mistakes, probably on a daily basis. I think that from the transfer strategy and the transfer business we've seen, they are making mistakes and have made mistakes, but they're also trying to work towards rectifying some of those mistakes. And if you can recondition yourself a little bit to understand that some of these signings that are brought through the door, like Cesar Casadei, for example, maybe even like an Andre Santos, maybe like an Angelo, maybe like a Kellyman, maybe some of these boys will never break into our first team, and maybe they were signed with the understanding that they weren't going to do so, then I think that you can maybe look at the signings like a Pedro Neto, a Joao Felix, a potentially a Victor Osimhen, Caicedo, Enzo Fernandez, and these sort of players, and understand that, okay, we're doing a bit of both here. We're signing these players with the intention to maybe, move them on and make a little bit of money on them, and therefore still be making sales every year so that we don't fail to comply with FFP rules. And at the same time as that, we're also trying to sign players that level up and improve our squad. The proof will be in the pudding. We'll find out about it once it's done. It's not me saying that definitively it's going to work, but it's also me saying that don't just run with the media narrative that it's awful, it's doom and gloom, and it's not going to work. We finished a couple of results off of qualifying for Champions League football last season, but the media wouldn't have you believe that, would they? They wouldn't have you believe that we got to a League Cup final. They wouldn't have you believe that we got far in the FA Cup and we finished a couple of results off of Champions League football. They want you to believe it's doom and gloom because, like Jose Mourinho once said, there is an agenda against Chelsea Football Club, and I fail to see why there's so much negativity that I've seen personally online around this Joao Felix move. I can't wait to have him in. I hope that he plays on Thursday. If not, I hope that he plays on Sunday. And the preview for the match against Servette will be up tomorrow. People, I hope this video came across in the right way, I'm really saying it's not me sticking up for the board, but it's me saying, listen, let's get excited, man. We got Joao Felix through the door. Things are looking good. He's going to come in and improve our squad. I'm telling you that now. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I will see you all in the next one.